When Karoline Leavitt stepped into the bustling city square, no one paid her any attention, just another stranger passing by. But when she stopped, when her sharp gaze landed on a blind girl selling paintings on the sidewalk, everything changed. Because this wasn't just any artist. Laura Carter was racing against time, painting with the last of her fading sight, desperate to afford the surgery that could save her vision. And what happened next left the entire city stunned. In true Karoline Leavitt style, she didn't just buy a painting, she turned one girl's desperate struggle into the most extraordinary act of fate. Laura Carter's brush danced across the canvas, guided by instinct rather than sight. Soft hues of blue blended with streaks of gold, merging into something abstract, yet unmistakably alive. Her small apartment smelled like paint, acrylics and turpentine mixing into a scent that felt like home. She sat by the window, the last sliver of sunlight warming her face. Not that she could see it, not really. At 17, Laura had already lost most of her vision. What remained was fading, slipping away faster than she could hold on to it. Shadows and light, blurry shapes, colors that bled into one another like a dream dissolving upon waking. She didn't talk about the fear, she just painted through it. The knock on the door was sharp. Her father's voice followed. "Laura, we need to go." The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, and Laura could feel the weight of her father's silence beside her. Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses, his voice careful. "Laura, the deterioration is accelerating." She knew what was coming. She had heard this tone before, the one doctors used when they were about to say something devastating. "There's a surgery that could save your remaining vision," he continued, "but without it, you'll likely be completely blind within the next few months." Her father exhaled sharply. "What's the cost?" Dr. Patel hesitated. Then he said the number. It landed like a punch. Laura didn't react. She had trained herself not to, but inside, panic curled its way into her chest. Her father cleared his throat, trying to sound steady. We'll figure something out." But Laura knew the truth. Their savings were gone. The hospital bills from past treatments had already buried them in debt. She sat there, gripping the edge of her chair, her pulse hammering. Because this wasn't just about money, this was about losing the last bit of light she had left, and she wasn't ready for that. The apartment was silent that night. The only sound was the soft scratching of Laura's brush against canvas, her hands moving automatically. Her father sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, his untouched coffee growing cold. They didn't talk about the doctor's words. They didn't have to. Finally, he spoke. "I'll pick up more shifts." Laura set down her brush. "That won't be enough." "We'll find a way." She shook her head, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Dad, we both know we can't afford it." The weight of the truth settled between them. He was already working 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings at night, loading delivery trucks at dawn. He barely slept as it was. "I won't let you go blind," he whispered. His voice cracked at the edges. Laura inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I have an idea." He looked up. "Laura? I can sell my paintings." His brows furrowed. "That's not—" "It's something," she cut in. "I can't just sit here waiting for a miracle." Her father rubbed his temples. "Honey, I know you love your art, but we can't rely on people buying paintings off the street." "What other choice do we have?" Silence. She let out a shaky breath, gripping the edge of the counter. "Dad, I can't lose what little sight I have left." His expression broke, just for a second. Then he nodded, swallowing hard. "All right." The decision was made. By morning, Laura was packing up her best paintings, carefully wrapping each canvas. Every brush stroke on them held pieces of her soul. She wasn't just selling art. She was fighting for her vision. And she wasn't going to stop until she won. The city pulsed with life. Cars honked in the distance. Street musicians strummed guitars on the corner, and the constant murmur of voices blended into the afternoon air. Laura Carter stood on the sidewalk, her fingers gripping the edge of her small wooden art stand. Her best friend, Lucas, adjusted the last painting on the display, stepping back to inspect the setup. "All right," he said, nodding. "We're officially open for business." Laura exhaled slowly. "This is insane." Lucas smirked. "No, this is genius. People are going to love your art." She wasn't so sure. The handwritten sign in front of her booth read, "Original artwork, raising money for eye surgery." It was honest, vulnerable, a plea disguised as a business pitch. Pedestrians streamed past, some slowing down to glance at the paintings, others not even noticing. The canvases were lined up neatly, each one a blend of color, emotion, and memory. Her hands had painted them, but her heart had shaped them. Yet no one stopped. A man in a tailored suit glanced at a canvas, then at her sign, his lips pressing into a tight line before he kept walking. A woman pushing a stroller paused for half a second, nodded sympathetically, then moved on. An older couple admired a piece, whispering to each other, but didn't reach for their wallets. Sympathy, that's all she was getting. Laura clenched her jaw, gripping the edge of the stand as the weight of reality settled in. Was this just a waste of time? Lucas leaned against the booth, watching people pass. "They see the sign," he muttered, "but they don't see you." Laura forced a smile, though her stomach churned. Maybe I should have just said 50% off and left the story out of it. Lucas shook his head. Someone will see you." But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, doubt crept in. Because right now, Laura felt completely invisible. She was about to pack up. The day had dragged on with nothing but fleeting glances and empty words. Laura's fingers were stiff from gripping the edges of the stand, her throat dry from forcing polite greetings. And then, a soft voice broke through the hum of the crowd. "These are beautiful." Laura turned toward the speaker, a kind-eyed elderly woman in a lavender sweater. She was standing in front of the stand, running her fingers lightly over the edge of a canvas painted in deep blues and soft whites. A stormy ocean beneath a glowing moon. Laura swallowed. "Thank you." The woman tilted her head, studying the piece. "Did you paint this?" Laura nodded. The woman smiled. "I can feel it." Laura's breath caught in her throat. The woman looked at the sign, then back at Laura. "How much?" For a moment, Laura didn't answer. She had rehearsed this, planned the pricing, but now that someone was actually asking? $80, she said, voice uncertain. The woman didn't hesitate. She reached into her purse, pulled out a neatly folded bill, and placed it in Laura's trembling hand. "I'll take it." Laura froze, the weight of the money foreign in her palm. Lucas let out a triumphant "yes" under his breath. Laura blinked. "Are you sure?" The woman chuckled. "Darling, art speaks. And this?" She tapped the canvas lightly. "This is saying something worth hearing." Laura fought back the lump in her throat as she carefully wrapped the painting. As the woman walked away, Laura stood there, $80 richer, but feeling like she had just won something much bigger. Because in that moment, she knew. Someone had finally seen her, and that meant everything. The warmth of her first sale still lingered in Laura's chest. She had sold one painting, just one. But it was proof that her work mattered, that people could see her, that maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. Then he arrived. A tall man in a crisp navy suit strolled past, a leather briefcase swinging at his side. He had the kind of presence that made people step aside without him even noticing. The kind of unshakable confidence that came with power and money. He barely glanced at Laura's display, barely noticed her at all. Until he did. His stride slowed and he turned toward the stand, hands in his pockets. He eyed the canvases, his gaze sweeping over them like they were trinkets in a flea market. Laura straightened. Can I help you? The man smirked. People don't buy real art from street vendors anymore? His voice was smooth, detached, like he wasn't trying to be cruel, just stating a cold, simple fact. Laura's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. The man tilted his head slightly, as if reconsidering. Then he chuckled, a low, condescending sound, and shook his head. Good luck, kid. And just like that, he walked away. The words dug in deep, clawing at her confidence, poisoning the small hope she had felt just minutes ago. Lucas muttered something under his breath. It doesn't matter. Laura cut him off, swallowing the bitterness rising in her throat. He doesn't matter. Lucas sighed. You're not going to let that get to you, right? Laura hesitated for half a second. Then she lifted her chin. No. Because if she let one arrogant businessman break her, she had no chance of making it. She wasn't painting for him. She was painting for herself. And for the future, she refused to lose. The sun was dipping lower, stretching long shadows across the pavement. Laura adjusted the position of her last remaining paintings. The cruel businessman's words still lingered in the back of her mind, but she shoved them aside. Just keep going. Then, another voice. This is beautiful. Laura turned. A woman stood in front of her stand, dark brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a press badge clipped to her bag. Laura tensed. A reporter. The woman smiled. Did you paint all of these yourself? Laura hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. The reporter's eyes sharpened with interest. And the sign? You're really selling these to afford eye surgery? Laura's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. She never liked talking about her condition. It made people look at her differently. Pity. But the woman's expression wasn't pity. It was curiosity. I am, Laura admitted. The reporter exhaled, glancing at the paintings again. That's... wow. She pulled out her phone. Would you mind if I take some photos? Laura blinked. Wait, really? Really? A flicker of something uncertain and hopeful passed through her. For the next few minutes, the reporter snapped photos of Laura's paintings, of her sitting at the booth, of the small handwritten sign that explained why she was there. Then she did something Laura wasn't expecting. She turned off her camera and looked Laura in the eye. What's your story? Laura hesitated, and then for the first time she told it. The surgeries, the fear, the need to fight for herself because no one else could. The reporter nodded slowly, taking quick notes on her phone. People should hear this, she said. I'll make sure they do. Laura wasn't sure she believed her. People promised things all the time. But the next morning, when she arrived at her stand, something was different. More people were stopping, not just to look, but to buy. Then her phone buzzed, a message from Lucas. Dude, check this out. A link followed. Laura clicked it. It was an article, her article. Fighting for art, fighting for sight, the blind teen painting her way to surgery. At the bottom, thousands of shares. Laura's heart pounded. This was real, and she had no idea just how big it was about to become. Laura Carter woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. At first, she ignored it, rolling over, groggy from another long day selling paintings. But it didn't stop. Ping, ping, ping. She groaned, reaching blindly for the device on her nightstand. One message stood out. Lucas. Laura, check your phone. Now. Her brows furrowed as she unlocked her screen, and that's when she saw it. Notifications flooded her screen. Hundreds, no, thousands, comments, DM mentions, shares. The article had spread far beyond what she ever expected. This girl's art is incredible. Buying one for my office. Who is she? We need to support her. Laura sat up, heart pounding. She clicked on the link Lucas sent. Her article wasn't just trending, it had gone viral. She scrolled down. More and more people were asking to buy her paintings. Some were locals offering to stop by her stand. Others were from different states, countries. Even celebrities had commented. A woman from California wanted 2 pieces for her gallery. A businessman in New York wanted a custom commission. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Could this actually be happening? She grabbed her cane, stumbling out of bed, calling for her dad. He was already in the kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it had just burst into flames. He looked up, eyes wide. Laura, you're all over the internet. She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, I noticed. Her father exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. So, what do we do now? Laura swallowed hard. We keep going. The city square was different today. Laura felt it the moment she arrived at her usual spot. The usual rush of pedestrians, the distant hum of street musicians, the smell of coffee from the corner cafe. But there was something else. More people. Her stand had drawn a crowd. She barely had time to set up before a group of women stopped, pointing at her paintings. You're the girl from the article, one of them said, pulling out her phone. I shared your story last night. Another woman flipped through Laura's canvases. These are amazing. I want this one. Wait, no, I want that one. Lucas shot her a grin. Told you, dude. Laura's hands shook as she handed over the first sale of the day, then another, and another. She was selling, fast. She couldn't believe it. Then, the energy shifted. A hush spread through the crowd like a ripple in still water. People started whispering, murmuring. Laura frowned. What's going on? Lucas nudged her arm, voice low but urgent. Laura, someone just walked up and, people are freaking out. Laura tilted her head. Who? Then, a voice, smooth, poised, confident. These are beautiful. Laura turned toward the source. And suddenly, she understood why the air had changed. Karoline Leavitt. She was standing right there, a powerful figure, a name people knew, a woman with influence, presence, and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Laura couldn't see her fully, but she felt the weight of the moment, because if someone like Karoline Leavitt had stopped at her art stand, something big was about to happen. The crowd held its breath. Laura could feel it, the shift, the anticipation, the silent weight of eyes watching. Karoline Leavitt stood in front of her booth, her presence like a storm just before the first crack of thunder. Laura's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She wasn't sure what to say. Karoline, however, seemed in no hurry. She tilted her head slightly, running her fingertips over the edges of a bold, textured painting, one that Laura had spent weeks perfecting. Then, finally, she spoke. Why do you paint? The question cut through everything. Not how much are these, not which is your favorite, not even tell me about your condition, just one simple, piercing question. Laura swallowed. She could have given a rehearsed answer, could have said something that sounded poetic or deep, but instead she told the truth. I paint because it's the one thing that still belongs to me, she said softly. The hum of the city faded around them, the noise of traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, it all melted into the background. I'm losing my sight, Laura continued, voice steady but raw. Every day it gets worse, the colors blur, the details disappear, and I know that one day I won't be able to see them at all. A lump formed in her throat, but she refused to stop. So I paint. I paint while I still can. I paint so that when the world goes dark, I'll still remember what light looks like. Silence. Then, a slow, measured nod from Karoline. She wasn't offering pity. She was listening. And that, more than anything, meant everything. Karoline took a step back, eyes scanning the collection of paintings one last time. Then, she reached for her bag. Laura heard the rustle of paper, the click of a pen. Wrap them all up, Karoline said smoothly. I'll take them. Laura's breath hitched. All of them? Not one, not two. Every single painting. Lucas gaped beside her. The crowd murmured, phones already snapping photos, recording the moment as Karoline calmly flipped through her checkbook. Laura's pulse thundered in her ears. She hadn't even named a price. But Karolina wasn't done. Because after signing the check for the paintings, she flipped to a second page. Laura couldn't see it clearly, but she heard the scratch of pen against paper, the rip of a check being torn out. Then Karoline handed it to her. "Here," she said, "this should cover your surgery." Laura's hands shook as she took the paper, her heart hammering. She looked down, and the number on the check stole her breath away. Because it wasn't just enough, it was everything, the full cost of her surgery, paid in an instant. The world around her blurred, not from her failing vision, but from the sheer weight of what had just happened. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. "What?" The word barely left her lips. "Why?" Karoline's lips quirked in the smallest of smiles. "Because the world needs more artists," she said simply. And just like that, Laura's entire life changed. For a second, the world stood still. Laura stared at the check in her trembling hands, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. The full cost of her surgery, paid, just like that. Then, like a dam breaking, the crowd exploded, gasps, shouts, cheers. Phones snapped up instantly, cameras flashing, people scrambling to record the moment. Murmurs turned into full-blown excitement as whispers of, "Did you see that?" and "Oh my God, it's really her," spread like wildfire. Karoline Leavitt had just changed someone's life, and the whole world was watching. A teenage girl near the front squealed, clutching her friend's arm. "Is this real? Did she actually just—" A man in a business suit shook his head in disbelief, muttering, "Unbelievable." Laura barely heard any of it. Her pulse thundered, her chest tightening, as emotions crashed into her all at once. Disbelief, relief, gratitude so deep it almost hurt. She opened her mouth, tried to find words, any words, but nothing came out. Karoline? Completely unfazed. She tucked her checkbook back into her bag like this was just another Tuesday, like she hadn't just flipped Laura's world upside down. Then she turned toward the cameras, because of course there were cameras now. A reporter, already holding up a mic, spoke breathlessly into her phone's camera. "We are witnessing something incredible right now. Karoline Leavitt has just purchased every single one of this young artist's paintings and covered the full cost of her eye surgery." The words hit Laura like a wave, not just because of their meaning, but because they weren't just words anymore. They were a story, her story, and it was already spreading. A woman in sunglasses turned to Laura, her voice thick with emotion. "I want a painting." Before Laura could react, another voice chimed in, "Me too?" Then another and another. Within seconds, people who had been casual onlookers minutes ago were now lining up at the stand, reaching for paintings, pulling out their wallets. It was chaos, the best kind. Lucas gaped at the sudden rush, his brain barely processing. Hold on, one at a time, people." A young mother lifted a painting of a sunrise. "How much for this one?" Laura swallowed hard. Her voice was shaking when she answered. $50? The woman handed her $100 without hesitation. "Keep the change." Laura blinked. Keep the change. She gripped the check in her hands, heart pounding, as more and more people gathered around, shouting out paintings they wanted. For days she had sat in this very spot, waiting, hoping, being ignored. And now the world finally saw her, and they weren't looking away. Laura's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She sat at home, still in shock from the wildest day of her life. The check from Karoline Leavitt was still on the table, untouched. Her art stand had been wiped clean, her once ignored paintings now scattered across homes she would never see. And now the world was watching. Ping, ping, ping. Her inbox was flooded, her name trending. Lucas had been glued to his screen all night, scrolling through the explosion of posts, articles, and videos. Everywhere he looked, people were talking about her. Twitter, a blind teenager selling art to afford eye surgery, just had her life changed by Karoline Leavitt. This is the kind of story we need. 20,000 retweets, 100K likes, millions of views. Instagram, a photo of Karoline handing Laura the check. Caption, when a simple act of kindness turns into a miracle. I'm crying. Where can I buy her art? This girl is incredible. We need to support her. News outlets were all over it. CNN, teen artist fighting for vision gets unexpected help from Karoline Leavitt. Fox News, an act of kindness that's breaking the internet. The New York Times, from the sidewalk to the spotlight, the story of Laura Carter. And then the donations started. At first it was a trickle, a few messages from strangers offering to send her money. Then Lucas gasped, jaw-dropping. "Laura," he whispered, shoving his phone in her face. She blinked at the screen. It was a GoFundMe. She didn't even know who had started it, but it didn't matter. Because the number on the page? It was over $200,000. Laura stopped breathing. Her surgery was covered. Her medical debt? Gone. And suddenly, for the first time in forever, her future felt limitless. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fresh linens. The walls were painted a soft blue, meant to be calming. But Laura wasn't calm. Her hands gripped the edges of the hospital bed, heart pounding in her chest. This was it. No more waiting. No more praying for a miracle. The miracle had already happened. Her father sat beside her, holding her hand. His grip was firm, steady, but she could feel the tremor in his fingers. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Laura swallowed. Yeah. She wasn't, not really. Because after today, everything could change, or it might not. The doctors had explained it carefully. The surgery had a high success rate, but there were no guarantees. She might regain her full vision. She might only regain part of it, or nothing at all. But she had to try. She had to. A nurse entered the room, offering her a soft smile. "It's time." Laura took a deep breath, and then she let go of her father's hand and followed the nurse toward the unknown. The world was dark. Not the kind of dark she was used to. This was different, thicker, deeper. She could hear the steady beeping of machines, the muffled voices of doctors in the hallway. Then, a voice she knew. Laura? Her father. She swallowed, her throat dry. Her eyes were covered in bandages. "It's over?" she rasped. He exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half held back tears. "Yeah, kid, it's over." A pause. Was it successful? Her father didn't answer right away. Instead, she felt him take her hand, squeezing it tight. "The doctor wants to remove the bandages first." Laura nodded, barely breathing. The next few moments felt suspended in time. A nurse's voice. "All right, Laura. I'm going to remove them slowly. Keep your eyes closed at first." Her heart pounded. The bandages unraveled, layer by layer. She felt the cool air against her eyelids. A pause, a heartbeat. "Okay, Laura, open your eyes." She did. And at first, it was just light. Blinding, overwhelming, fuzzy. But then, shapes. A room, and in front of her, her father's face. For the first time in years, tears burned her eyes. His voice broke. "Laura?" And then she started crying too, because she could finally see him. Laura Carter walked into the gallery, her breath catching in her throat. Her paintings, her work, were hanging on the walls of an actual art exhibit, framed, lit by warm, glowing spotlights, surrounded by people who had come just to see them. She still couldn't believe it. Less than a year ago, she had been sitting on a sidewalk, hoping someone, anyone, would buy her paintings. Now? Now she was standing in one of the most prestigious art galleries in the country. She ran her fingers lightly along the small plaque beneath one of her pieces. Artist Laura Carter. She blinked. That was her name. Printed, official, real. The gallery owner, a distinguished older woman with silver hair and an eye for talent, approached her with a proud smile. "Laura, you have no idea how many people have asked about your work tonight." Laura exhaled softly, still overwhelmed. "I never thought—" The woman chuckled. "Believe it." A soft murmur of voices filled the gallery as people admired her paintings. Art critics, collectors, students, and even families with their children pointing at her bold strokes and vibrant colors. They weren't just looking, they were feeling. Laura had spent years painting from instinct, from memory, from emotion. And now, people were seeing the world through her eyes. Her father stood near the entrance, watching the scene with glassiness in his eyes. He gave her a small, proud nod. Lucas appeared beside her, grinning. "I hate to say I told you so, but—" Laura laughed, nudging him. "Shut up." Then, a gallery assistant approached her, an envelope in hand. "Miss Carter, this arrived for you." Laura frowned, taking it carefully. The paper was thick, expensive. She opened it, a handwritten letter. She recognized the signature before she even finished reading it. Karoline Leavitt. Her breath hitched. "Laura, never stop creating. The world needs to see what you see." No dramatic speech, no fanfare, just a quiet reminder from the woman who had set this entire journey in motion. Laura pressed the letter to her chest, swallowing the lump in her throat. Because Karoline was right. She wasn't just painting for herself anymore, she was painting for everyone. The wind was cool, the city humming with the same familiar rhythm. Laura Carter stood on the sidewalk, her old sidewalk, the one where she had once sat for hours, hoping someone would notice her. But today, she wasn't selling, she was giving. A small easel was set up beside her, and at her feet, a row of framed paintings. A young girl with paint-splattered fingers hesitated nearby, staring at a bright, sunset-colored canvas. Laura smiled. "You like it?" The girl nodded shyly. "Then it's yours." The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" Laura nodded, placing the painting carefully in her hands. "Art is meant to be shared," she said, "and sometimes the best things in life are free." A small crowd had started gathering. Some people recognized her, whispering. Others had no idea who she was, but stopped anyway, drawn to the colors, to the generosity, to the quiet magic of it all. Her father leaned against a lamppost nearby, watching with a knowing smile. Lucas sat cross-legged on the pavement, doodling in a sketchbook. Laura exhaled, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She could see, she could paint. She had a future, and it had all started right here. Not with money, not with fame, but with a simple act of kindness. She picked up her brush, dipped it in deep blue, and let the first stroke glide across the canvas. Because no matter what happened next, she was never going to stop painting. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more shocking.